They didn't even lower their voices, just sat 2 rooms over, sipping their wine and slicing strawberries for the kids' breakfast, and said it plain as day. "Don't bring her. She'll slow us down." I was standing by the laundry basket, folding Emma's pajamas, when the words hit. I froze, hands mid-fold like I'd stepped into a cold wind. "You know how she is," my daughter-in-law added. "She won't keep up with the excursions, and honestly, it'll just make everything more complicated." I didn't move, didn't breathe. My son didn't argue, just gave a soft, like he'd already decided. I'd paid the deposit 3 weeks ago. Booked my spot when they told me about the cruise. Said it would be a family adventure, something the kids could remember forever. I'd even offered to pay a share for the suite, and Alice had waved me off with that tight smile of hers. "No need, Mary. Just your company is enough." Apparently, it wasn't. I spent the rest of the morning going through motions, helped Emma find her reading glasses, made sure Noah packed his swimsuit. They weren't cruel, my son and Alice, just efficient. They kept me included in the planning, sort of. Asked if I liked fish or chicken, told me we'd be docking in Cozumel. But now I saw it for what it was: politeness. They'd let me tag along if I insisted, but deep down they hoped I wouldn't. I was their contingency plan. The spare chair, the extra hand if someone got seasick. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my checkbook and a stiff drink I hadn't touched in years. My cruise reservation sat on the counter. Balcony suite, 3rd deck, adjoining room to the kids. I stared at it a long time. Then I picked up the phone and dialed. "Hello, Royal Horizon line?" "Yes, I'd like to cancel my current booking." "No, I'm not changing my mind. But I would like to upgrade." "What's the most private suite you have?" The woman on the line hesitated. "Our presidential suite, ma'am. It includes a private terrace, personal concierge, premium dining access." "I'll take it," she paused. "It's significantly more expensive." "I'm 78, I said. "I've been saving coupons and reusing tea bags since Nixon was in office. I'll take it." She laughed nervously, processed the change. When she read the total, I didn't flinch. I gave her my card number, confirmed my early boarding time, and hung up. I sat in the quiet, fingers wrapped around the glass. So that's how it felt. To stop asking for room in your own family and take space instead. I didn't tell them. Let them go on thinking I'd be in Ohio, watering the ferns and feeding the cat while they drank rum on a deck chair. It suited them, and for once, it suited me too. 2 days before departure, Alice sent me a cheery text. "We're getting excited. Weather looks great. So glad we had that time with you this weekend." I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled my suitcase from the back closet, the good one with the leather corners and the quiet wheels. I packed carefully. 2 sundresses, my walking sandals, the navy jumpsuit I'd never worn because it felt too fancy for church. My husband's old Panama hat, the one he wore on our honeymoon in Key West, went in last. He'd have loved this mischief. The morning of departure was cloudless. I wore white slacks, a pale pink blouse, and my mother's pearl earrings. At the port, I waited in the priority boarding line. A young man in a blazer took my bags and smiled when he read my name on the manifest. "Presidential suite, Ms. Lowell. Welcome aboard." Ms. Lowell. Not Mom, not Grandma, not Mary the obligation, just me. As the gangway thudded beneath my feet, I didn't look back. My family wouldn't arrive for another 4 hours. By then, I'd be sipping chilled Riesling on a terrace big enough to host a small wedding, while they stood in line for buffet wristbands. Let the ship sail. I wasn't chasing them anymore. The suite door closed behind me with a soft click, And for a moment, I just stood there, letting the silence soak in. Suite 1201. Presidential. I'd never stayed in anything like it, not on land, let alone the open sea. A wide room flooded with natural light. Cream sofas. Fresh orchids in a glass vase. Floor-to-ceiling windows that opened onto a private terrace where the ocean already rolled out, endless and blue. I set my bag down slowly, like I was stepping into someone else's story. The concierge knocked within minutes. Young man, sharp uniform, polite to the edge of reverence. "Welcome, Ms. Lowell. I'm Lucas. I'll be your personal assistant for the cruise. May I unpack your luggage?" I blinked. "I think I can manage." He smiled. "Of course. If you need anything, just dial 0. Breakfast preferences, private excursions, room service. We're here to make your stay unforgettable." Unforgettable. Now there was a word I hadn't heard aimed at me in a long time. Not in any sincere way. Not since my husband passed. After he left, I walked out onto the terrace. The sea wind hit my face gently, lifting the edges of my hair. I closed my eyes and leaned on the railing, just breathing. No chores, no babysitting, no secondhand plans. Just me and this vast stretch of water, and the quiet knowledge that nobody expected me to be here. At lunch, I didn't head to the buffet like I'd always done on past family trips. I went to the adults-only dining room, where a pianist played soft jazz and waiters refilled glasses without being asked. The maître d' led me to a table by the window without hesitation. A couple across from me whispered when I sat down, smiling. "Presidential suite," I heard the woman say, her voice impressed. I pretended not to notice. I didn't know what I looked like to them, maybe like someone who belonged here. That thought startled me more than it should have. I ordered grilled sea bass and a crisp glass of wine. Ate slowly, letting the flavors sit. No requests from children. No questions about when I'd be done. No one tapping a spoon against the table, rushing me forward through my own day. After lunch, I wandered the upper decks, not lost, just exploring. A spa on the 12th floor, a library tucked behind a cocktail lounge. I passed by the kids' splash zone and saw my grandson, Max, tugging at Alice's arm. She looked flustered, her sun hat crooked. Daniel, my son, was arguing with a crew member about something, gesturing toward a pile of mismatched luggage. They hadn't seen me. I didn't pause. By the time they got to their stateroom, cramped and internal, no windows, I was already back on my terrace with a fruit platter and a stack of old Agatha Christie's I'd brought for the occasion. I started with the mirror cracked from side to side. Appropriate, I thought. That evening, I dressed for the captain's welcome dinner, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. I wore the dark green silk blouse I'd bought and never dared to use, along with slacks that still fit just right. Pearl bracelet. Lipstick. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I hadn't seen in years. Not elegant, maybe, but unmistakably present. The ballroom was crowded. Laughter, clinking glasses, the hum of well-dressed people enjoying themselves. I took a seat near the back, just to watch. The captain eventually stood, raising a glass to the crowd. "To our passengers in the Royal Suites," he said, "thank you for choosing to sail with us. And to our guest in the Presidential Suite, Ms. Lowell, we hope you find this voyage to your liking." Heads turned, politely. I smiled, nodded once. A few curious glances. A toast raised in my direction. It wasn't grand. It wasn't loud. But it was seen. That night, back in the suite, I pulled the curtains wide and left the glass doors open to the breeze. I drank chamomile tea on the deck in a soft robe, toes bare against the cool tile. Below, the ship moved like a whisper through the dark. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, whether they'd spot me, whether the illusion would crack. But for now, I had peace, real peace, and I wasn't sharing it. Not yet. I woke to the sound of the sea breathing, that slow, endless rhythm just beyond the glass doors. The sky was still pale, the world barely stirring. For the first time in years, I hadn't needed an alarm. My body simply knew it had rested enough. No knocking on the door, no morning chaos, just light, water, and a sense of something close to freedom. I made myself coffee from the little machine on the vanity, figuring out its blinking buttons like a puzzle. The beans were fresh ground. The cream was real. I took the cup outside, sat on the deck wrapped in my robe, and watched the sun rise over the water. Golden, gentle, warm. The ocean didn't care how old I was, how many people had written me off. It didn't ask me to move faster or speak softer. Somewhere below, I imagined Alice scolding Max to sit still while she smeared sunscreen on Lily's cheeks. Daniel would be hunched over his phone, checking email even here. That was his way. Always trying to control what couldn't be controlled. I'd raised him better, or so I thought. I didn't dwell. After breakfast, delivered to my suite, steaming and perfectly arranged, I decided to explore the art gallery. It was quiet there, tucked near the wine bar. A woman about my age stood studying a large abstract piece. She glanced at me and smiled. "Do you see anything in it?" she asked. "I see a fight," I said. "Or the end of one." She laughed softly. That's more than I got. Her name was Teresa, widow, like me, from Oregon, traveling alone. We walked through the exhibit together, talking about the kind of things women only say once they've lived long enough to stop sugarcoating. Her daughter had begged her not to go. "You'll be tired, Mom. It's a long cruise. Maybe next year." That had made her book it, she said, out of pure spite. "I like you already," I told her. We agreed to meet for the dance class that afternoon. I hadn't danced since the church hall socials back in the 80s. I almost backed out, told myself my knees were too stiff, that I'd look foolish. But at 2 sharp, I showed up. The instructor was a handsome man from Havana who had too much charm for one room. He partnered each of us in turn, teaching slow salsa steps with patience and playful encouragement. Teresa winked at me as I twirled, awkward but steady. My body protested, but my spirit didn't. It felt good. Strange, but good. The family, I learned later, had missed the excursion boat. A couple from the table behind me at dinner was talking about it. "Some poor folks got left behind," the woman said. "Apparently, their kid had a meltdown, and they had to reschedule everything." I sipped my wine. Back in the suite, I drew a bath in the enormous marble tub and soaked until my skin wrinkled like old linen. I thought of the family's cramped cabin, how the kids must have been bouncing on the beds, Daniel checking his calendar, Alice quietly fuming that things weren't perfect. I felt no guilt. Not that I didn't love them. I did. But love had worn thin in recent years, stretched out like old elastic. They loved the version of me that was useful, available, invisible, unless needed. Now I was none of those things. After the bath, I slipped into my cotton nightgown, pulled the covers high, and opened my book again. Hercule Poirot was halfway through exposing the killer when I heard voices outside. Faint, muffled through the wall. My suite shared one thin edge with another. Through it came the unmistakable laughter of a child. Max. I froze. I'd forgotten. I hadn't checked which deck they were on, but of course, families with children didn't get upper suites. They'd be somewhere below, but if the children's club spilled onto nearby floors, They could be close. Too close. I muted the lights, walked to the door and peered through the peephole, heart thumping. Empty hallway. Of course I was being ridiculous. There were 2,000 people on this ship. It was a coincidence. Still, I felt the first flicker of risk. Let them find me, part of me thought. Let them knock and ask how I got here. Let them squirm. But another part, the deeper, quieter part, wanted a little longer. Just one more day of being unobserved, of being more than someone else's background. So I stayed quiet. Let the ship keep moving. Let them think I was home, knitting by the window, waiting for photos. I had no intention of being anyone's shadow ever again. The fourth morning came with silver clouds stretched low across the sky, the kind that promise rain but rarely deliver at sea. I wrapped a shawl over my shoulders and stepped out onto the terrace, watching the horizon melt into mist. We were somewhere between Grand Cayman and Honduras, somewhere far enough, finally, from everything that used to bind me. Room service arrived with a gentle knock. Fresh papaya, croissants, hot tea steeped just right. Lucas, ever efficient, checked if I needed anything else for the day. There's a wine tasting this afternoon, Ms. Lowell, and a jazz trio in the Azure Lounge tonight. If you'd like, I can reserve a front table. I almost said no. The voice of habit still whispered that I should stay invisible. But I stopped myself. Yes, please, I said. Both. Excellent choice, he smiled. Oh, and your laundry is returned, pressed and folded, as requested. I thanked him and waited until the door closed before laughing out loud. Pressed and folded. When was the last time anyone had done anything for me without needing something in return? Not since the hospital, probably, when Daniel had shown up late with a single lily and a Bluetooth headset still in his ear. I pulled the sliding door shut and went to sort through the fresh clothes. My navy jumpsuit hung smooth and perfect, not a wrinkle in sight. I laid it gently on the bed, thinking I might wear it to the jazz set. Just then, I heard a knock, not at my door, but at the one next to mine. I froze. A familiar voice came muffled through the wall. Room service for Thompson. Alice. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. It made sense now. I hadn't checked my suite's adjacency when I booked, just wanted privacy and space. But of course they'd been upgraded when the original cabin was overbooked. These things happened. And of all the rooms on this floating city, fate had wedged them right next to mine. For a few minutes I just sat there, heart thudding. I could hear her talking to Max, asking him to use his quiet voice. Heard Lily's little feet padding across the floor, then the telltale crash of something spilled. Alice let out a sigh. Not a dramatic one, just tired. I should have felt vindicated, should have smiled at the poetic justice. But I didn't. I felt hollow. When did we all become strangers sharing a hallway? Later that afternoon, I stepped out just as Daniel turned the corner with a towel slung over his shoulder. I instinctively turned my face away, fumbling with the room key as if I were just another guest. He didn't glance at me, didn't pause. I watched his back retreat down the corridor. Back in my room, I stared at my reflection. Lipstick worn off, gray hair pulled into a soft knot. Nothing remarkable. Just an old woman on a ship full of strangers. I almost wiped my eyes, but didn't. At the wine tasting, I met a couple from Chicago. Retirees who'd sold their house and decided to spend their golden years on the sea. "We don't see the kids much anymore," the man said with a shrug. "They're always busy." We stopped waiting. I nodded. "We used to feel guilty," his wife added. "Now we just feel rested." I laughed softly. "I'm learning." The jazz trio played Ellington and Simone, and I let the music pour over me like warm rain. I sat at the front, alone but not lonely. Across the room, I noticed Teresa again, in a deep red scarf and wide smile. She waved her fingers at me. "You dance?" she asked during intermission. "I used to." "Well, tonight you do again." And I did. We laughed and swayed and stumbled and caught each other's hands. For a moment, I wasn't 78. I was just Mary, a woman who remembered what it felt like to be moved. Back in the suite, I changed into my robe, set my book aside, and walked onto the terrace. The sea was dark and full of stars. The ship moved steady beneath my feet. Next door, the lights were still on. I heard them talking, not fighting, not laughing, just the low, tired sound of a family getting through another day. I leaned on the railing, breathing in the salt air. Let them be near. Let them stay unaware. For now, I needed no confrontation, no recognition. Just one more night under the stars, in a space I chose, on a path that was finally mine. The rain came sometime before dawn, soft at first, then steady, tapping against the glass like someone asking politely to be let in. I woke before my alarm, though there was none set. At home, I always woke to Max's early cartoons, or the mail carrier slamming the box too hard. But here, on the 5th morning of my secret voyage, it was only the rain and the sighing ship that stirred me. I didn't open the curtains right away, just lay in bed, under the thick hotel weight covers, watching the gray glow seep through the sheer drapes. I wondered whether Alice would try to keep the kids inside today, whether Daniel would complain about the canceled snorkeling. The cruise itinerary was printed in my suite folder, and I knew we were scheduled to anchor at Roatan by noon, a little island off the coast of Honduras. But with this weather, likely not. I didn't mind. I had no plans to disembark anyway. I had everything I needed right here. After a long shower, longer than I allowed myself at home with the ever-dripping faucet and the guilt of water bills, I dressed in a soft linen blouse and slacks. I braided my hair loosely and secured it with a simple pin. No one would be watching. I liked it that way. Lucas delivered breakfast again, cheerful, despite the gloomy skies. "Ms. Lowell," he said, handing me the tray. "We've added cinnamon rolls today, just out of the oven. The chef remembered you mentioned them on the first day." I blinked. "I did?" He grinned. "You did. You said, 'I haven't had a good one since 1985. He took that as a challenge." I laughed, surprised. "Well, let's see if he wins." I took the tray and sat by the window as the sky deepened into a charcoal blur. Rain sheeted across the balcony glass in gentle arcs. The cinnamon roll was perfect. Warm, flaky, not too sweet. I savored it slowly, bite by bite, feeling more cared for in that moment than I had in months. Later, I wandered the ship again. The halls were quieter on rainy days, most people staying in their cabins, catching up on movies or bickering softly behind closed doors. I passed by the children's activity room and paused when I heard Lily's unmistakable voice. High, urgent, always asking why. I peeked in through the glass just long enough to see her sitting cross-legged on a bright blue mat, crayons in hand. Max was beside her, drawing something intently. The young woman leading the activity wore a wide smile that I knew from experience would fade by the 3rd hour. I moved on. In the atrium, they were serving complimentary tea and board games. I joined a table where 2 older women were playing Scrabble and arguing over whether vex was a real word. It was. I said so. We laughed. I stayed for an hour, not because the company was exceptional, they weren't, but because it reminded me of something I used to do. Simply sit with people. No agenda, no expectation. Just the soft companionship of shared time. After lunch, the rain eased. I wandered back to my suite and opened the terrace door. The air was thick and damp, the sea calm again. I sat with a paperback and read 3 chapters before I realized how quiet everything had become. Then I heard the knock. Not at my door. The next one. I couldn't help it. I moved slowly, noiselessly, toward the shared wall and pressed my ear gently against it. Daniel's voice, low and tight. "We have to figure something out. She's not picking up, and they won't let us rebook without a penalty." "Alice, I told you we shouldn't have counted on the excursion desk. We're not priority passengers." "Daniel, don't start." A silence. Then Max. "I miss Grandma." Alice's sigh was audible. "She's home, sweetheart. You'll see her after the trip." Another silence. Then Lily. "She's not home. I saw her." My heart stopped. Daniel laughed. "What do you mean, Pumpkin?" Lily again. "I saw her. The lady on the deck with the big balcony. She looks like Grandma." Alice's voice dropped. "That's not possible." I stepped back from the wall, my chest thudding in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not from fear, but something like it. A tremble of exposure. I pressed my palms flat against the marble countertop. Let them wonder. Let them stew. I had nothing to explain. That night, I skipped the dining hall and ordered dinner to the suite. Lamb chops, herbed potatoes, and a glass of red wine that warmed my chest better than any apology would have. I watched the sea in silence. They might know. They might not. But I wasn't hiding anymore. Not from them. Not from myself. The next morning broke sharp and bright, as if the storm had scrubbed the sky clean overnight. I opened the terrace doors to a wind that smelled of salt and sunlight. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear children's laughter and a deck chair scraping against tile. The ship was wide awake, and so was I. I took my time dressing. Simple cotton slacks, a sea green blouse, the good leather sandals I rarely wore back home for fear they'd look too dressy for the grocery store. Here, there was no grocery store. Here, I could dress for myself. Lucas had left a note with the breakfast tray. "Chef's table invitations available for this evening. Would you like me to secure you a place, Ms. Lowell?" I scribbled back, "Yes, please." One guest. For a moment, I hesitated before adding the last line. The day unfolded slowly. I strolled along the upper decks, pausing to read placards near the shuffleboard court, watched the younger crowd spill out of the smoothie bar in sandals and swimsuits, faces flushed with sun. No one paid much attention to me, and I liked it that way. It reminded me of something I'd nearly forgotten: how to be a person without explanation. By early afternoon, I wandered to the back of the ship and found a small, quiet lounge nearly empty. Just a man in a Panama hat reading the Wall Street Journal, and 2 women playing cards in silence. I ordered iced tea and settled into a chair by the window, letting the ocean fill my eyes. It was there, lost in that peace, that I heard the voice. "Grandma?" I turned slowly. Max stood near the entrance, clutching a worn-looking deck of playing cards, blinking at me like he wasn't sure I was real. I smiled gently. "Hello, sweetheart." He didn't move, didn't run to me or shout, just stared, wide-eyed, mouth slightly open. "Are you," he whispered, "are you here alone?" "I am," I said softly. "And so are you, right now." He glanced behind him. "We're supposed to be looking for the trivia room. Mom and Dad are fighting again. She said the excursions were a mess and the dinner reservations got mixed up and… He stopped, fidgeting. They're mad a lot. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a wrapped butterscotch, held it out. He stepped forward, took it without speaking, and sat beside me. We stayed like that for a while. He didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer explanations. Sometimes presence is enough. When the butterscotch was gone, he looked up. I miss you. I swallowed hard. I miss you too. Are you going to come to dinner? Not tonight, I said. But you can always visit me here. Okay, he whispered, and then suddenly worried. Should I tell them I saw you? I smiled. Only if you want to. He nodded slowly, as if filing away a great secret, and then jumped down from the chair. I'll go find the trivia. Before I could stop myself, I said, Max? He turned. Tell Lily I like her drawings, even when they're on napkins. His face split into a grin, and then he was gone. I stayed in the lounge a while longer, heart still catching up to itself. I should have felt afraid. The game was cracking, the privacy thinning. But I didn't. Something about Max's quiet understanding settled me. Back in the suite, I let Lucas know I'd be attending the chef's dinner after all. Just one. No guests. That evening, I wore the soft lavender blouse I'd been saving for no occasion in particular. Pearls at my ears, the kind no one had complimented in years. The table was long, elegant, arranged with name cards and polished silverware. 8 of us in all. A retired surgeon, 2 women from Montreal, a couple celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary, and 1 man, mid-60s, with dark eyes and a journalist's stillness, who introduced himself simply as Clark. I haven't seen you at many events, he said after the first course. I've been hiding, I answered. He smiled. From whom? Everyone. A worthy pastime. The meal stretched over 2 hours. Scallops with saffron cream, lamb in a red wine glaze, a ridiculous tower of chocolate and pistachio mousse. Wine flowed. Laughter deepened. By the time dessert arrived, the journalist leaned in and said, You're not really hiding. You're waiting. That night, as I stood on the terrace in bare feet, the moon carving a bright path across the water, I finally felt it. Not triumph, not spite, but something softer. Readiness. They could find me. They could ask. They could unravel the silence I had built. And I wouldn't run. It was almost noon when I saw them, the whole family, on the midship observation deck, gathered around a map of the next port. Alice held a guidebook open like a shield. Daniel pointed at something with a hotel pen, his other hand juggling the walkie-talkie they'd borrowed from the kids' club. Lily was leaning over the railing, barefoot, her face turned toward the wind. Max, I noticed, stood slightly apart. They hadn't seen me. I was 3 floors above, tucked behind a tinted glass panel near the quiet sun deck. I watched them without guilt, sipping my grapefruit soda slowly, like it was some rare champagne. They looked tired. Not just the usual vacation fatigue, sunburn and sugar crashes, but something deeper, like the effort to hold it all together had finally begun to crack around the edges. They'd changed their clothes again. Alice wore a loose-fitting blouse and sandals she wouldn't have been caught dead in back home, a kind of surrender to practicality. Daniel's button-down was rumpled. His jaw clenched and unclenched every few seconds. I could read it from here, the telltale signs of a man on the edge of a performance. And yet, as I watched them from my perch, invisible, quiet, dry, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt something more complicated. Back in the suite, I called Lucas and asked him to cancel my dinner reservation. "Everything okay, Ms. Lowell?" he asked, voice warm as ever. Everything's just fine, I said. I think I need a quiet evening. Instead, I went walking. Not the usual polished promenade stroll, but down to the lower decks where fewer passengers lingered. Past the laundry chute, the employee cafeteria, the modest little cafe tucked behind the art gallery that no one ever seemed to find. I ordered black tea and sat with my book in the corner booth. 2 pages in, I felt someone slide in across from me. It was Teresa. "You're hiding?" she said, smiling. "I'm resting," I corrected. "There's a difference." She chuckled. "I heard you made quite the impression at the chef's dinner last night. Clark said you shut down a Texan oil man with 1 sentence about foie gras, and it was the highlight of his trip." "He said that?" I blinked. I didn't even know he heard me. "Oh, he did," she said. "And so did half the table." We drank our tea in companionable silence. At one point, she reached over and patted my hand. "You know," she said, voice softer now, "I saw a boy, your grandson, I think, come out of the trivia lounge yesterday. He looked like he'd been holding his breath." "Max," I murmured. "He saw you?" "He did." "And?" "And he kept the secret." She nodded. "Good boy." Later, I wandered back upstairs just in time to catch the start of a movie night on the deck, some silly animated film. Blankets, beanbags, hot chocolate. Families in clusters, teenagers trying not to be seen with their parents. I slipped into a chaise lounge near the back. And there they were again, my family. Alice was smoothing Lily's blanket. Daniel had a box of popcorn balanced on one knee. Max sat between them, unusually still. Halfway through the movie, Max stood up, walked away. I followed, not closely. He went toward the portside stairwell, down 1 flight, then paused, turned, looked around to see, and saw me. We didn't speak. He walked to me, silent, then did something unexpected. He hugged me, no words, just arms around my waist, face pressed into my blouse. I held him back, my hand on his hair. After a long moment, he pulled back. "They're kind of a mess," he said, matter of fact. "I know. I told Lily you're here. She says you're magic." I laughed. "She might be right." He grinned, tooth missing. "I don't want to go home." "You don't have to yet." He looked up. "Are you mad at them?" "No," I said truthfully. "Just tired." He nodded. "Me too." When he turned to go, I let him. Back in the suite, I sat with the lights off, listening to the slow breath of the ocean. No phone calls, no knocks. Just the quiet echo of my grandson's small truth. They're kind of a mess. We all are, I suppose. Some of us just learn to carry it more quietly. The next encounter was not planned, but then again, nothing meaningful ever is. It was the morning of the snorkeling stop, Belize, I think. I hadn't signed up for the excursion. I didn't care for fish or for flippers that pinch your ankles. Instead, I took my breakfast alone in the Solarium Cafe, a peaceful glass-walled space high above the churning sea. I was halfway through my toast when I heard Daniel's voice. "Excuse me, is there still time to register? We were waitlisted yesterday." I froze. The cafe wasn't private. It was open to anyone, technically adults only, but no one enforced much. I shrank back slightly in my chair and shifted my body toward the window. My reflection in the glass was faint, but there. A woman in pale blue, with pearl earrings, sipping tea as if the rest of the world didn't exist. I heard footsteps approaching, then stopping. Silence. Then a breath. "Mom?" I didn't turn. I didn't have to. I could feel him staring at the back of my head, as if unsure whether I was real or some version of me conjured by guilt and ocean air. I reached calmly for my cup. "Mom," he said again, softer. I turned then, slowly. Our eyes met. It was not a cinematic moment. No swell of music, no dramatic gasp. Just two people who hadn't looked each other fully in the face for too long. "Daniel," I said. A nod. Polite, unrushed. He blinked. "You're here." "So it would seem. But," he floundered. You said you weren't coming." "No," I corrected, setting my cup down gently. "I said nothing. You assumed." His face flushed. Not embarrassment. Frustration. Alice and I thought, you'd be more comfortable at home." "More useful, you mean?" He opened his mouth. Closed it. The cafe had grown quieter. The people nearest us had lowered their voices. I stood up. Smoothed the edge of my blouse. "I'll be in my suite," I said calmly. "If you want to talk. Alone." He hesitated, then nodded. I left without waiting to see if he followed. Back in suite 1201, I paced. Not anxiously, just enough to keep the thoughts moving. I replayed every word, every tone. I should have been shaking. I wasn't. There was a knock. He entered slowly, like a man stepping into a confession booth. "It's nice," he said, glancing around. "It's mine," I replied. He looked at me then, and for a moment I saw my boy. Not the man with graying temples and a tight jaw, but the boy who once held my hand, walking into 3rd grade, knuckles pale with nerves. "I didn't know." "No," I said. "You didn't ask." A pause. "I guess I just assumed you wouldn't want to travel alone." I raised an eyebrow. That I wouldn't enjoy the sea, or the sun, or a glass of wine on a quiet deck. He sank into a chair. "It's not like that." "No?" I sat opposite him. "Because from where I sit, Daniel, it's exactly like that. You planned a family cruise. You told everyone it was all-inclusive. You told the children I'd be happier staying behind. You didn't offer. You didn't ask. You decided." He was quiet. His hands opened and closed in his lap. "Max found me," I added. He didn't say much. Just sat with me a while. Daniel looked up. "He said something about seeing you." I didn't believe him. "No," I said. "Because it didn't fit the story." He winced. "I'm sorry." I believed him. That much I'll give him. He meant it. But sorry is a word like any other. It needs actions to hold it up. "I'm not angry," I said after a moment. "Not really. Just done pretending this is what I deserve." He nodded, slowly. "I understand." I doubt he did, not fully. But maybe, for the first time, he wanted to. "Mom," he said quietly, "why didn't you tell us? That you were coming? That you booked this?" I smiled. "Because I didn't need to." He stayed another 10 minutes, talked about the weather, the children, the lobster buffet that was apparently overhyped, and then he stood. Hesitated. "You'll come to dinner tonight?" I shook my head. "Not yet." He left without argument. I stood at the window as he disappeared down the corridor. Not triumphant, not sad, just whole. For the first time in a very long time. That evening, I didn't dress for dinner. I didn't curl my hair or line my lips. I wore my soft house sweater and warm socks and ate mushroom soup in a wide porcelain bowl while watching the sea slip past in silence. No music, no calls, no one expecting anything from me. For the first time in decades, I wasn't performing. Daniel's visit had shaken something loose, not out of anger, but out of clarity. The man I'd raised had stood before me, apologizing like a boy who'd broken a window and didn't quite understand how. And it was strange, the peace I felt afterward. like I'd finally handed back a burden I was never meant to carry. Later that night, the ship held a masquerade, a grand event in the ballroom. Live music, champagne fountains, women in shimmering dresses and feathered masks. I almost didn't go, almost curled up with my book and my tea and let it pass. But something in me stirred, not pride, not spite, just curiosity. I dressed slowly. The dark navy dress I'd packed just in case, with sleeves that floated like silk smoke. A velvet mask from the boutique, deep violet. I pinned my hair up, slipped on low heels, and looked at myself in the mirror. Unrecognizable. And finally, fully myself. The ballroom glowed gold and silver. Musicians played swing. Waiters floated with trays. I stood near the back at first, sipping sparkling cider, unnoticed among the whirl. Then, a tap on my shoulder. May I? It was Clark, the journalist from the chef's dinner. Wearing a tailored black suit and a half mask that made him look mischievous and sharp. I nodded. We danced. Slowly at first, then not so slowly. I laughed when he spun me gently. He didn't ask questions, didn't fawn or flatter. Just moved with me like we'd done this 100 times. You don't seem like someone who hides, he said during a pause. I did, for a long time. And now? Now I've remembered how to stand in a room. He tilted his head. I'd say you never forgot. At one point I stepped aside to catch my breath. That's when I saw them. Daniel and Alice, standing near the entrance. No masks, no mystery. Just watching. They hadn't spotted me yet. Max stood between them, holding Lily's hand. His eyes scanned the crowd with an urgency I recognized. The need to find something familiar in a world that suddenly feels too large. And then he saw me. His face lit up. He whispered something to his sister, and she tugged at Alice's hand, pointing. Alice turned. Her mouth fell open. I stood still. Daniel followed her gaze. His jaw clenched slightly. Habit, I suppose. He raised a hand, uncertain. Not a wave? Not yet. Just a question. I nodded once. Then I turned back to Clark, who was waiting with 2 flutes of champagne. One real, one apple cider. He handed me the latter with a grin. Whoever they are, he said quietly. They look like they've just remembered you're not invisible. I was never invisible, I replied. They just stopped looking. The music shifted. Another slow number. Care for one more? He asked. I took his hand. Over his shoulder, I saw Daniel and Alice still watching, uncertain whether to approach, whether to interrupt something they clearly hadn't anticipated. They didn't. I was glad. Let them stay in the doorway for once. Let them feel what it's like to be the ones left wondering. We danced until the music faded and the crowd began to thin. Clark bowed slightly, kissed my knuckles. Old-fashioned, charming, unnecessary. I walked back to my suite alone, mask still in hand, shoes dangling from my fingers. On the terrace, I stood barefoot under the stars. I had been seen, and I had chosen the moment myself. The morning after the masquerade, I woke with a strange weight in my chest. Not heaviness exactly, more like fullness. As if some room inside me that had long been closed off had finally been aired out. The mask lay on the desk where I'd left it. Velvet and ribbon, still holding the faint scent of Clark's cologne and my own perfume. I touched it absently, then turned away. No use clinging to metaphors. It had served its purpose. I'd worn it, danced in it, and more importantly, I'd taken it off on my own terms. Lucas brought breakfast as usual. Fresh coffee, 2 poached eggs, and a slice of sourdough so perfectly toasted it almost made me cry. You looked stunning last night, he said as he poured the coffee. They're still talking about you in the dining hall this morning. Oh, I'm sure they are, I smiled. Nothing more exciting on a ship than an old woman twirling in silk. He chuckled, but there was warmth in his eyes. Not the patronizing kind, the kind that sees you. When he left, I carried my plate out to the balcony. The sea was calm, almost glassy, and the sky was that early blue that looks like it's holding its breath. That's when I heard the knock. Not on my door. Next one over, then voices. Not sharp this time, not frustrated. Soft, careful. She danced, Daniel, with that man. Everyone saw. I know, Alice. And she looked different. Pause. I know. Silence. She's not going to just slip back into things when we get home, is she? More silence. Then, I don't think she should. I froze, the toast halfway to my mouth. It was the first time I'd heard that tone in his voice, a mix of regret and something like awe, as if he'd caught a glimpse of me and couldn't quite make the shapes of what he saw. I went inside quietly, closing the balcony door. I didn't need to listen anymore. That afternoon, I took a long walk across the main deck. People nodded at me, not because they recognized me from the dance necessarily, but because I carried myself differently now. Shoulders up, eyes level, the way women do when they've remembered they are not here to be tucked away. I passed the boutique and saw Teresa through the glass, trying on a wide-brimmed sun hat. I stepped in and tilted my head at her. Too dramatic? She asked. Not enough, I said. Take the red one. She laughed and handed it to the clerk. We walked together to the lounge for afternoon tea, two women of a certain age moving with the ease of those who had nothing left to prove. As we settled into a booth, I spotted Max across the atrium, sitting with Lily at a table covered in puzzle pieces. He looked up, saw me, and raised a hand in that quiet way of his, barely above shoulder height, just enough to say, I see you. I raised mine back. Alice came around the corner, spotted us, hesitated. She didn't come over, but she nodded. It was enough. That night, I dressed simply. No fanfare. The navy jumpsuit again, the one that moved just right when I walked. I hadn't planned to attend the gala dinner, but Clark had left a note with Lucas that morning. If you're tired of dancing with yourself, I'll be near the champagne fountain. I went. The dining hall was full of light and linen and the low murmur of luxury. Waiters moved like water. A quartet played something I didn't recognize, but that suited the room. Clark was already there, holding 2 glasses of the sparkling stuff. Thought I might find you, he said. You're persistent. He smiled. I'm curious. We didn't dance that night, just talked. About books, about places we hadn't been, about how aging makes the world smaller until you remember you're allowed to redraw the map. At one point, I caught Daniel watching us from across the room. His expression wasn't hurt. It wasn't even confused. It was quiet, as if he were watching someone he didn't quite know and trying to decide if he wanted to. When I returned to my suite, there was a note slipped under the door, in Daniel's handwriting. Can we have breakfast? Just you and me? No expectations, no explanations, just coffee and time. D? I stood there, holding it for a long time. Then I folded it, placed it next to the velvet mask, and turned off the light. Not as a rejection, but because for the first time in my life, I wanted to choose my mornings. The next morning, I didn't answer the note. Not out of cruelty. Not to teach him a lesson. I just wasn't ready. I'd spent most of my adult life answering without thinking. To the phone, the door, the child's cry, the husband's sigh, the endless stream of little needs and medium demands, I'd answered even when silence would have served me better, even when I was bone tired, even when no one asked if I wanted to. So no, I didn't answer. I went walking instead. Deck 5, port side. The quiet side, where the shuffleboard courts had been left abandoned and the lifeboats hung in tidy orange rows like obedient punctuation marks. I walked with my hands behind my back, slow and steady, like my grandfather used to do on Sunday afternoons. It wasn't about the exercise. It was about stillness. I passed a man sleeping under a towel, a crew member wiping down railings, a couple arguing softly in French. I stopped to watch the horizon. It was a pale silver ribbon today, the kind that makes you think the world might still be capable of forgiveness. Then I turned, and there he was, Daniel, not dressed up, just in shorts and a faded shirt, coffee in one hand, his other tucked deep into his pocket like he didn't know what else to do with it. He didn't speak right away. Neither did I. We stood there, two people caught in the space between memory and now. "I didn't mean for things to feel like this," he said finally. I nodded. "I know." "I didn't realize." He trailed off, then laughed once, dry. "I didn't realize how small we'd made your life." I blinked. The words weren't harsh, but they struck something tender in me. "You didn't make it small," I said. I let it shrink. Every time I said yes when I meant no. Every time I chose silence. He looked down. "I thought I was helping." "I know," I said, "and I thought I was loving you by staying useful." We stood in that quiet wind pressing against us, gulls circling in the far sky. Then he said, "You were right not to tell us you came. You deserved this. On your own terms." I didn't thank him. It didn't feel like a compliment. It felt like truth finally spoken aloud. "You and Alice," I asked carefully. "Are you all right?" He gave a tired smile. "We're working on it. Vacations don't fix anything. They just show you where the cracks are." I looked at him, this man I had raised who now looked so much like his father when he was worn thin, and I felt a strange ache, not regret, just distance. Time passed, roads taken. "Max and Lily," I said. "They're good, they're kind." He nodded. "They adore you." "I adore them." A pause. "I don't know how to fix all of this," he said quietly. "You don't have to," I replied. "You just have to see it, really see it. That's the beginning." He nodded again, slowly. "I'll let you be," he said then, and turned to go. But before he left, I touched his arm. "Daniel." He looked back. "Maybe tomorrow. Breakfast." His smile was small, but it reached his eyes. "I'll be there." That night, I sat on the terrace in my robe, knees drawn up, hands wrapped around a mug of peppermint tea. The ship moved gently beneath me, and for once, I didn't feel like I was chasing it. I was still, whole. And tomorrow I would meet my son for breakfast. Not because he needed me, but because I chose to. We met at 8. I chose a corner table by the window, one with soft cushions and a view of the endless blue. Not too close to the buffet, not tucked away in shadows. I wanted light. I wanted space. Daniel arrived on time, carrying 2 coffees and looking like he hadn't slept much. He set one down in front of me. "Still take it with cream?" "I still do," I said. He smiled. We sipped in silence for a few minutes. Ships are good for silence. There's always the hum beneath you, the hush of water against metal, the distant clatter of silverware somewhere nearby. You never feel the silence is empty, only still. "Eventually," he said, "I don't know how you kept this from us." "You made it easy," I said, not unkindly. He winced. "I mean that," I added. You were also sure I wouldn't come. You never checked in. Never asked if I'd change my mind. You said your piece, that I'd slow you down. And that was that. He didn't argue. Just stirred his coffee with a plastic stick, the sound small and soft between us. I'm sorry, he said again. I know you've heard that before, but I am. I nodded. I believe you, and I also know it's going to take more than that. He looked up, and I saw a flash of something in his eyes. Not guilt, recognition. I think I started thinking of you as permanent, he said. Like furniture. Always there. Always given. You've been doing so much for so long, I forgot it was a choice. It stopped feeling like a choice a long time ago, I said. It just became routine. Wake up, help with the kids, be useful, be quiet, be grateful for being allowed to tag along. He looked down. You deserved better. I deserved to be asked, I said. That's all. Not taken, not assumed. Just asked. A pause. The waiter came and took our orders. Eggs and toast for him, oatmeal and fruit for me. When he left, Daniel leaned forward. The kids know you're here now, he said. Alice didn't want to tell them at first. She was embarrassed, I think. But they found out. Max was the first. I know. He says you're a spy, Daniel smiled. Said you're on a secret mission to teach us manners. I chuckled. Smart boy. He looked out the window, then back at me. What happens when we get home? I shrugged. That depends. On? On whether you mean it when you say you want things to be different. Because I do. I've lived more in these 12 days than I have in years. I remembered who I was before I became convenient. I don't want to forget again. He nodded. Then we'll figure it out. Our food came. We ate quietly. I noticed how he buttered his toast just like his father used to. Too much in the middle, none on the edges. I hadn't seen it in years. After breakfast, we walked a little along the upper deck. Not talking much. Just two people relearning the rhythm of shared space. I could feel something shift between us. Not healed, not solved, but softened. Before we parted ways, he stopped. Will you come to dinner tonight? He asked. No fanfare. Just the five of us. No speeches. I hesitated. Then, yes. His relief was visible, but he kept it small. Back in my suite, I stood at the mirror and looked at myself. Same wrinkles, same hair, tucked back with a clip, same hands that had done too many dishes, too many favors. But the eyes? They were mine again. That evening, I knocked on their door for the first time. Suite 12-2. Alice opened it. She didn't speak right away, but she stepped aside and let me in. Max grinned. Lily ran to hug me. Daniel was already pulling out a chair, and for the first time in a long time, I took my seat at their table, not as the helper, not as the afterthought, but as myself. The dinner was simple. No white tablecloths, no string quartets. Just the five of us around a small, round table, the kind where elbows bump and voices blend. The children were still in their swimsuits, wrapped in oversized towels, hair damp from the pool. Alice had set out plates of room service spaghetti and tiny bottles of sparkling water with lemon slices floating inside. I brought nothing but myself. It was enough. Max sat beside me, leaning in close, like he couldn't quite believe I was real. Lily climbed into my lap after 2 bites, her fingers sticky with sauce. No one stopped her. No one told her to sit properly. We were past such things, at least for the moment. Daniel poured water for everyone like it was wine. Alice folded napkins with unnecessary precision. She didn't look at me often, but when she did, it wasn't sharp. It was unsure, careful. I could live with careful. It was better than cold. We didn't speak of the cruise, or the suite, or the silence between us that had stretched so long it had almost become tradition. We spoke of the next day's port, of the iguanas Lily hoped to see, of Max's new favorite trivia word, pulchritude, which he'd pronounced porkritude to great dramatic effect. And still, beneath it all, the tension curled like a ribbon at the edge of the table. Quiet, but not gone. After dinner, Alice began clearing plates. I rose to help by instinct. Old habit. The helper in me still reflexively moving, but she stopped me. "I've got it," she said, not harsh, just firm. Our eyes met. "Okay," I said, and I sat back down. Later, Max insisted I stay to read the bedtime story. It was an odd little book about a mouse detective and a jewel thief. Lily fell asleep halfway through. Max stayed awake, watching my face more than the pages. "Will you be at breakfast tomorrow?" he asked quietly when I closed the book. "I think I will." He nodded, solemn. "Good. You make better toast." I smiled and kissed his forehead. Daniel walked me back to my door. Not all the way, just part. We didn't talk. The ship was quiet at night. Fewer parties now, the long stretch of sea between ports having worn down even the most ambitious revelers. Before we reached my suite, he stopped. "I should have seen it sooner," he said. "What we were doing. How much we'd taken for granted." "You were busy building a life," I said, "and I made it easy to forget I had one of my own." He nodded. "But you didn't lose it. You just paused it for us." "I paused it too long," I said. "That's on me." We stood there, the hallway lights soft and low. Then he did something that startled me. He reached out and hugged me. Not the quick, distracted kind of hug I'd grown used to. The real kind. The kind where someone holds on just a second longer than necessary. I held him back. For a second, I felt all the years collapse into that moment. His first fever, his high school graduation, the time he called me crying from college because he'd locked his keys in the car. And then it passed. He pulled away. "Good night, Mom." "Good night." In the suite, I stood barefoot on the balcony. The sea was black and vast, but not threatening, just open, endless, waiting. And I realized something. This wasn't about revenge, or teaching lessons, or proving I was still worth a reservation. It was about returning to myself, and staying there. We docked in Cozumel the next morning. The sun rose hot and immediate, with that Caribbean intensity that makes even shadows feel alive. From the balcony, I watched passengers stream down the gangway. Couples in matching hats, children bouncing with anticipation, older men grumbling over sunscreen and sandals. I didn't move. I had no interest in excursions or souvenir shops, no desire to photograph another dolphin or haggle over jewelry I'd never wear. What I wanted was here, not in the destination, but in the stillness I'd carved for myself. This quiet suite, this steady view, this version of me that no longer asked for permission. By midday, the ship had emptied out. Even Lucas seemed to vanish. I ordered lunch from the cafe downstairs and carried it to the sun deck. The adults' only one with soft loungers and no music, just wind. Teresa was already there. She glanced up from her book. "You're not in town?" I shook my head. "You?" "Please," she scoffed. "Another market full of carved turtles? I've seen enough turtles to last a lifetime." We sat together in the sun, not talking much. Just two women who had stopped apologizing for needing peace. After a while, she said, "Clark told me you danced like someone who'd just remembered how." I smiled. Maybe I had. She closed her book. "You know, I've been traveling alone for 6 years. At first it felt like exile, then it felt like escape, Now it just feels like living. I nodded. That's the shift, isn't it? When it stops being running away and starts being arrival. She reached over and touched my arm, just briefly. Whatever happens when you get home, don't shrink back. I won't, I said. I meant it. That evening, I returned to their suite, 12-2. This time, I knocked. Alice answered. She looked tired, but not brittle. She'd tied her hair back and removed her makeup, and for the first time in years, she looked young again. Not in age, but in openness. She stepped aside. They're drawing, she said. Max wanted to show you something. The children sat on the floor with markers scattered between them. Max held up a folded paper. It's the cruise, he explained, but from your suite. He'd drawn the ship from the top down, balconies, pools, the big screen on the upper deck, and in one corner, a large square labeled Grandma's Place, with a little figure standing on the balcony, waving at stick figures below. She sees everything, he said proudly. Alice knelt beside him. She does. Lily climbed into my lap again without asking. We spent the evening like that, in floor time and laughter, in small voices and warm hands. Alice joined the circle slowly, then easily. At one point, she handed me a mug of tea. I'm sorry, she said quietly, not just for the cruise, for how often I've let you disappear into our convenience. I didn't answer right away. Then, thank you. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. And that was enough. Later, Daniel offered to walk me back again. I declined. I want to walk by myself tonight, I said. Of course. As I stepped into the hallway, Max called out, Wait! He ran to me, arms wide, hugged me tight. Come to the kids' talent show tomorrow? He asked. I'm going to read my pirate poem. I wouldn't miss it, I said. He grinned, already halfway back into the room. In the corridor, I walked slow. The ship was gently rocking, the way it always did the night before departure, like it was already missing its passengers. Back in the suite, I poured myself one final glass of wine, not to celebrate, not to unwind, just to mark the moment. Tomorrow we'd dock again, and the day after that, we'd all return to the shore, to regular lives, to unread emails, to laundry. But tonight, I was still here, exactly where I chose to be. Disembarkation day always has a certain rhythm, hurried, restless, final. Suitcases cluttered in the hallways, announcements echoing through the speaker system, people standing in line for coffee they won't finish. The ship that had felt like a floating world now felt like a terminal with better carpet. I took my time. My bags had been collected the night before. Everything folded, zipped, weighed. Not because I was eager to leave, but because I'd already packed what mattered most. And it wasn't in the luggage. It was in the girl who'd climbed into my lap without asking. In the boy who drew me with open arms and called it Grandma's Place. In the man who had finally seen me, not as furniture, but as mother. And in me, who had finally stopped asking for space and started taking it. Lucas knocked once, as promised. Ready, Ms. Lowell? I nodded. Thank you for everything. He smiled, and for a moment he looked like he might say more. But he didn't. Just bowed slightly and rolled the cart down the corridor. I stood at the door a moment longer, then turned. Walked one last time through the quiet suite, fingers brushing the marble counter, the soft back of the chair where I'd read Hercule Poirot, and watched the sea. I stepped out onto the balcony. The dock had already begun to fill with taxis and porters. I breathed in deep. The air was thicker here, touched with oil and hot pavement, but I didn't mind. It meant return. It meant choice. I heard footsteps. Then Daniel's voice. "They're holding a spot for us in Group 7. I turned. He stood beside Alice, Max between them, Lily perched on her hip. "We can wait," I said. He nodded. For a long second, none of us moved. Then Lily squirmed down and reached up for my hand. "I drew you again," she said, "but this time in a garden. You're wearing a crown." "Oh?" I smiled. "What kind of garden?" "Tomatoes," she said seriously, "and beans and flowers." "Sounds perfect." Max tugged on my sleeve. "Can we come visit your house sometime? I want to see your garden too, not just the drawing." I knelt to meet his eyes. "You can come, but next time, I'm not cooking every meal, understand?" He grinned. "Deal." Alice stepped forward. There was something in her face I hadn't seen in years. Not apology, not even regret, just an open door. "I'd like to help," she said quietly, "if you'll let me." I held her gaze, then nodded. "We'll start small." Daniel checked his watch, then looked at me. "You okay?" "I'm good," I said. "Better than." We boarded the gangway together. No fanfare, no speeches. Just the sound of the sea behind us and the dry scrape of wheels on concrete. Outside, the taxis lined up like beetles. The air was too bright. Everything felt too fast. And yet, I didn't feel behind. I felt ready. As we reached the curb, Max turned to me and said, "You didn't seem old on the ship." I blinked. "What do I seem now?" He shrugged. "Just tall." I laughed. We said our goodbyes with real hugs this time. Not the rushed kind, not the habitual. The kind that stays. I climbed into my taxi alone. As we pulled away, I didn't look back at the ship. I'd already taken what I needed. Back home, there would be bills, groceries, dust on the windowsill. But there would also be my garden, my bed, my pace, and no more asking to be seen. I had seen myself. That was the beginning of everything. If this story found you at the right time, share it. Leave a comment. Save it for later. Maybe someone else needs to remember they're not invisible either.